So we got Parker Calvert, baby! Hey. Hey, dude. Good to see you on the Ted Jones World podcast, guys. So, Parker, founder of NYC Culture Club, which we'll get to, but I met you at the Artists versus Writers game in East Hampton, the 75th annual, bro. So you and your brother at Superstar, your brother hit a home run.
I hit the home run.
You hit the home run. Let's go. My dog. The entire day, I was like, I got to hit a home run here. I didn't end up hitting a home run. I think I went 2 for 4, though.
A good rip on one.
It was solid. Yeah, I definitely did.
I was like, who's this guy?
But you hit the home run, dude. You were the star of the show, man. You were great. They wrote about you in the paper and everything.
Everyone still thinks it's my brother.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Even me, dude. We're going to get you a little bit in here.
Cool.
You might be one of our taller guests that we have had on our show. One of my friends who's a comedian, Tobin Miller, he's like 6'7" though. What are you, 6'5"?
Nah, 6'3".
6'3"?
Yeah.
You have a bigger presence
though. Yeah, what can I say?
Nice, dude. So let's get to it, man. You've got a lot of things going on in your life, art-wise, and then just New York City buzz-wise. So let's talk about the Culture Club, your art club.
So back in 2021, my brother Clayton and I started a nonprofit gallery at the World Trade Center. And the whole idea was to create an open space for artists, an exhibition platform where we don't take a commission, we don't charge a fee. We basically have our curators help staff the show as the only real expectation of them, aside from a high quality show. And so we're on our 22nd exhibition in 2.5 years there. And that's been kind of our baby.
Nice. So in terms of like getting artists to your space, how does that work? Like you talk about events, like is it just basically like from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. at night, people will come through and check out the art and then all the artists are there? How does that
What's
look?
nice is that the space itself is, you can walk by it 24 hours a day. So no matter what, we can have people able to view shows. In terms of like how we meet artists and how we like bring it all together, it's usually word of mouth. People just send submissions. We have some different nonprofits that we've partnered with. So in the shows that we've done, we've had a pretty wide range of shows, everything from paintings to sculpture, photography, dance, musical performances, everything in between. We've really tried to create a platform that really just is about the art and not so much about like the market of the art.
What was your original, like, what's your background? What did you go to college for and then high school? We'll start from the beginning.
I grew up in New York City. I went to Bard High School Early College on Houston Street, and that enabled me to graduate from George Washington University by the time I was 19. And I got my BA in econ.
What?
Yeah. So
graduating at 19, did you feel like you jumped the gun a little bit? Did you miss
pulled a little Doogie Howser?
Yeah. Okay. But did you, when you were in college, did you feel like you were like in place
like
or what?
A full blown adult when I was like 12.
Oh, damn.
Living in the city, I think really just like I didn't miss anything.
So I grew up in the city too. I moved here when I was 6 weeks old. I always give like the little Jersey sprinkle. So moved here when I was 6 weeks, and then I went to Friends Seminary downtown. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Yeah.
And then I went to professional children's school because I was like a traveling tennis player.
Oh, that's awesome.
If I needed to leave on like a Thursday, they'd send me the homework Friday, Monday. But you talk about like growing up in the city, like bro, we grew up so fast. Like I know at least 10 kids that were sober by the age of 21. You know what I mean? Like
it's funny you
they're
say that.
drinking from 17. I'm sure you do too.
Well, people are always like, what's it like growing up here? And I'm always like, well, half my friends turned out amazing.
Yeah, dude. So true. So
it's
true.
like
It's really,
sink
like
or
depends.
swim,
Like taking the subway by ourselves when you're like 12, 13, like going all over the place. But yeah, it forces you to really grow up faster being in the city. So you must have been into art since you were super young, right?
So we went to middle school on 84th and Park, and so we'd play football next to the Met in the Temple of Dinder, and basically our football would hit the glass and we'd go running from the guards. So, it's always been kind of in our DNA, and just my dad actually originally moved to New York in 1982. And was modeling and acting. And so I kind of, watched him in the acting world. And, he ended up kind of, when he had a family, that took precedence, of course. I think being an actor in New York City is hard enough as it is. And so I watched that and I thought, wow, like, isn't it awesome to be creative, to be passionate about creativity? And it was always fostered,
Do you like comedy at all?
Love comedy.
Yeah?
Yeah, I actually trained at UCB.
Oh, let's go, dude. I got the Herald. You see the sign right there on the refrigerator?
I used to play poker with those guys back when I was in high school.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I hope I'm not blowing up anybody's underground.
No, definitely not. Definitely not, dude. So you took UCB from what?
Yeah, I did
1 through 4?
201, 301, and then I didn't do 401. I just it was, I think, I don't remember what the impetus of not doing 401 was, but like it was awesome every step of the way. And I was like,
so March of 2020, I was supposed to have my 401 class show, and then I was going to start getting involved in like the couple days a week or whatever. And the pandemic kind of definitely forced me to focus more on stand up. Like I haven't really gotten back into improv just because in the city it's kind of limited. I hear that they're opening up a second city in Williamsburg within the next few months.
Right?
So maybe I'll check that out in terms of like performances and stuff. But yeah, just stand up comedy has gotten a lot bigger since the pandemic came back. Maybe we can organize a Ted Jones comedy show at like one of your galleries.
Yeah, let's talk about
That'd be dope.
We're always open to these
That'd
things.
That'd be dope, dude.
Yeah.
Nice. So growing up though, in the city, like what was your first real recognition of being like, wow, art is fascinating. I might want to do this. And what do you think about NFTs too?
Oh, it's two good questions. I'll touch on the more interesting one first.
Yes.
So growing up in the city, I was obsessed with the trains. And so I would look out the windows in the front. And one of the first like artists that I really loved was a street artist named Revs, Colston Revs, C-O-S-T and R-E-V-S. And Revs would go in the subway tunnels, whitewash a whole wall and write journal entries. And Cost would take the big rollers, and these guys kind of revolutionized just the idea of like cool locations where you could get your work on like Canal Street hanging off 10 feet off of a building kind of stuff. And so I was always just like fascinated by that. And then thinking about it, I feel like the subways were always where I saw graffiti. And so graffiti for me as a kid was like the most fascinating thing because I have a bit of like, photographic memory, but also OCD. So if I see something time and time again, I'm like, oh, I recognized it. And so for me, it was like a very kind of earnest, like growing up in New York, seeing it everywhere. And then like, of course, going to museums. And my brother, I'll say this, he studied art history. He's got the most eidetic art history knowledge of anyone I've ever met. He can hold his weight with anybody, scholars from all around. He loves it. He knows it. He eats, breathes, sleeps it. He had mentors who were, octogenarians who were geniuses of art.
What's
that? 80-year-olds.
Octogenarian?
Yeah, you gotta have fancy ways of saying things,
dude, I love it. Yeah. Right. Of course.
Yeah.
A sommelier while you're looking at the art and shit.
Yeah.
Wait, dude, did you ever get involved in graffiti though? Or no, you just liked it from afar. Yeah. On the record, so you better watch yourself.
I never did nothing.
Yeah. But one of the cooler graffiti, I guess, types was on Bowery. What number street Bowery was that? The big townhouse? Do you know what I'm talking about?
So there was that big like bank that was like graffiti all over it and became supreme.
That's what I mean.
But the Bowery was like one of the iconic art locations in New York City lore and history. For sure.
Isn't it funny how those artists had like 3,000-foot art studios and they're paying nothing, and now like it's probably luxury development, or those apartments are probably worth $50,000 a month.
Friends' dads literally squatted in their apartment in Soho, and that's how they got it.
Oh, okay. And they took it over, and now it's like still stabilized.
They're no longer there.
Well, right, but you got to do what you got to do in New York, man. Yeah. Where'd you go to college?
George Washington.
Okay.
In
DC.
DC.
Yeah, you talked about that. And when you were at George Washington, though, were you an art history major?
I actually, so because of the high school, like the program of coming in with a bunch of credits, I applied as a freshman. I lived in freshman housing. And the first week there, the advisor was like, hey, we can't just ignore these 60 credits. We're going to give you 52 of them. So I called my mom. I was like, Mom, let's do this. Like, I'm going to do 3 years. I'm going to cruise through college. And my mom's an educator.
But you wanted to do 3 years and you were already there early?
Well, so hold on. So I tell my mom my plan. And so she's got her doctorate from Columbia in education.
Cool.
And she's just a lifelong educator. And so she was always pushing us just education at the forefront. And so she was like, oh no, you're going to finish in 2 years and take summer courses. And I was like, all right, that's what we're doing. So I had back to back 18 credit semesters. I took summer courses at City College to make up. And because of the credits I came in with, I basically had a choice of 2 majors if I wanted to finish in 2 years, if my mom wanted me to finish in 2 years.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and did it. And the choice was sociology or economics. I was far more interested in sociology, but the whole point of it was always to be a backup plan. So originally, I mean, I love acting to this day, but that was what I wanted to do when I was 17, 18, 19, get into acting, get into filmmaking. And in a weird circuitous way, you know, it's, I feel like I'm getting closer to, you know, more of that narrative filmmaking kind of point in my life.
Okay.
Because photography took hold. It was really awesome. I got an opportunity to work in fashion and had never worked with a flash or a strobe or a radio trigger. I had no idea what any of those things were. And so when I got the opportunity, they're like, have you ever shot in a studio? I was like, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, duh.
Yeah, no doubt.
You'll figure it out later.
Now you'd be like, yeah, no cap. I swear I'm not mid.
To get back to what we were talking about earlier, NFTs. Did you think that was going to be like a big part, or maybe in the future it will be, but did you think like a year and a half ago it was going to be a big part of your installations and Culture Club?
I never once thought that it was actually going to be a thing for me on the saleable side of art. I think personally, I think a lot of like NFTs, you know, kind of will end up becoming part of like the provenance of things. So like when you trade it, it'll be like a deed to a house. That's like where I see it more practically involved, because like I love digital art, I love visual, like video art, I love all of it. But as someone who's made a lot of video art, it's hard to get eyes on video art. It's hard to sell video art. It's hard to place video art. So, you know, in the sense of the hierarchy of art, in a lot of ways, it's like painting, sculpture are like king. And then photography kind of gets lessered.
What's your favorite museum in the city? Maybe people listening, that they should go to this museum.
You know, it's funny because I have this conversation with my brother a lot, and it's, you know, you can't really go wrong. He would probably tell you the Frick, and right now the Frick is under renovation. So until it's actually back in the building, it's not the same experience. The Morgan Library on 35th and Madison. That's an extraordinary museum.
Underrated maybe, right?
Oh my God, that's a sleeper.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I love that place.
I lived on 37th and Madison. It was like my first apartment with a roommate
cool.
out of college.
Cool.
So I'd walk by there all the time and always be like, what's going on in there? So Bard High School, that was an artsy high school, correct?
Oh my God.
Okay, so I freestyle a bunch of my boys, and one of my go-to lines is, "I'm artsy, but I didn't go to Bard." You know, that was like, so I sprinkle that in, bro.
Well, because that's Bard College really is more of that reputation.
Okay.
So the high school early college program, you get a degree from Bard College and associates. So I had never even been to Bard College, and I have an associate's from there.
Interesting. What did your day-to-day look like in terms of being passionate about art? Would you go to museums a bunch?
You know what's interesting? I think I was a lot more passionate about like activities at large. So like I'm a very active person from the time I get up to the time I go to
hitting bombs during softball, dude.
I'm just like boom, boom, boom. Like I played sports year round: baseball, football, basketball, soccer, tennis, golf. Like I just love sports.
Football in the city?
Just like with friends.
Oh,
you know, I played in like the asphalt green little league.
Nice.
Got, you know, should have gotten the MVP. You know?
Yeah. So for me, I played college tennis at UConn, and when I won the MVP when I was 12 years old in Peter Stuyvesant Little League baseball, I had to decide at that point. It was like between baseball and tennis. I chose tennis because I just hated when people in the when outfielders would miss the easy pop up and I'd be pitching. I'd be like, bro, I wouldn't have missed that. So I just go to tennis, and I'd rather everything be my fault you know, or good on that other side.
I like that. That's one of the things I actually really love about tennis is that it's really all you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the other person, you can let them fail, and unfortunately errors are your best friend. But,
yeah, exactly.
You know, I feel like it's one of those things as like a achievement goes. I'm a huge Serena Williams fan, huge Roger Federer fan.
Did you go to the Open this year?
I didn't this year, but I used to work at the US Open as a kid.
What'd you do? Ball boy?
No, I wish.
What
I worked at the Lacoste store when I was 16.
Oh, nice.
I got them to hire me. I saw like an ad on Craigslist, and my mom was like, you should get a summer job. I was like, all right.
Oh, and like the 2 weeks was good for summer.
When I went to the interview, they were like, we don't hire under 18. And I was like, yeah, but
you were like, but I look
like, yeah,
18.
But like, come on, I was the same height. And I just, I've never like, this is such a funny story now that I think about it, because like I went into this interview with this guy, Seth. He was awesome. He was super cool. And I sat down knowing that they didn't hire under 18, but I was like, I got to do this anyway. I want to work at the US Open. And they set up like a little shop in the side of Arthur Ashe. So it's basically like, I could get free clothes. I could like, you know, get a discount, whatever, and then get to go to the US Open. And so I go to the interview, and it's a group interview, and everything's going well. And like little 16-year-old me just like thought to crack a joke with, and they're like, so like, what are the things your former employee didn't like you used to do? And I had just told him that the only work experience I had was tutoring. And I was like, yeah, well, like the mom of the kids I work for, she really hates when I show up to work drunk. And everybody in the interview looked at me and I was like, I'm just kidding. I'm 16. Like,
you're like kidding. She loved it when I was drunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it Lacoste though? Was that like right around when Annie Roddick was repping Lacoste?
Yeah.
Is that's probably one of the, I feel like that really drove Lacoste. And then because now Djokovic is playing with Lacoste.
One of the most awesome things about that experience was that I just had this amazing access to all of the practice rounds. I used to go every day. I snuck into a Federer match on the main court. First time I saw him play, he double faulted. I was like, oh, okay. If this guy's double faulting.
You saw the solar eclipse. The guy never double faults. Yeah. That's hilarious, man. What is your, I know I talked about your day-to-day when you were younger, but what about now? Like what you run in here, I know you have a short window to do the pod, and I appreciate you for coming, man.
Of course.
For sure. But like what does your day-to-day look like?
I would say every day is different, but has components that help keep me in place, I would say. So, I wake up, I love coffee, I meditate, I stretch, I'm big on stretching, I'm big on mobility, I love Qigong, yoga, I love mindfulness, things that like help me get through the chaos of my day.
Yeah.
The other side of my schedule is like, a typical day this week has been 3 straight 18-hour days in a row of like nonstop, not even barely eating.
Is that like a good amount of travel, like to places in Chelsea, West Village, Soho?
If you put like a GoPro on me or like a tracker, I would say, but for like delivery guys and taxi drivers, there's probably fewer people doing as many like out, back, forth, up, down, left, right. Because I live uptown. Our gallery's downtown. I bike everywhere, city bikes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how you get around.
Revels, I take the train.
What area do you think is the best for art galleries now? Because we have a lot of West Chelsea, Soho, West Village, and then down there, World Trade Center.
I feel like Chelsea, what I like about Chelsea is that it's such a clustering effect. So like you have all these galleries that like every artist in the world would kill to be a part of. And then so that brings out all of those people who are like the young hopefuls who have that great energy to be around and who are also like driven and motivated. And so I feel like in Chelsea, you come across really like interesting people, and a lot of my friends would be at the opening. So that's where I'd say like most of the openings I go to are, but love the Lower East Side. Tribeca's got a really big push right now. Of course, the Financial District.
Yes, of course. The World Trade Center.
Yeah. Well, we were the first gallery down in the World Trade Center, and since they've opened up a gallery down the hall, and then there's like 3 or 4 new cultural projects down the hall as well. So I feel like we were fortunate enough to like get in with amazing people who are like, Westfield is super supportive. Silverstein, they're super supportive, and like just having people like that who. There's a lot of developers we've reached out to try to like get them to kind of come on board and do stuff, because as a New Yorker, I'm super passionate about why do we have all this empty space? Like, what are we going to do with all this space? Yeah. Like, we need to do something with this space.
Especially in like the office realm.
Yeah. And so Silverstein's actually redesigning a number of like office buildings to kind of retrofit to homes. But that's one of the big problems developers are facing, is because an office building has an entirely different infrastructure. So in a lot of ways, it's almost like you might as well just start from scratch, because sometimes it's so difficult to convert like these like big floors that are designed for desks everywhere, and not with like plumbing and electrical and all of that. So, but yeah, to tie it back in, like working with these like the developers and like working down there, it's just like a dream come true, because these people move mountains. They literally were responsible for the most incredible construction site in history. Going down there, I'm constantly floored. Yeah. I basically kiss the ground whenever I go to the studio we have.
I remember I was there maybe like 2.5 years ago, and it seemed like one of the first things that was done was that mural kind of like in between like all of the World Trade Centers. You know what I'm talking about?
I probably know the muralist. Yeah. I know, like there are friends on our floors, and they're just like, the community of artists down there is vast. There's dozens in different towers working on different projects. There's just so many creative resources down there. Right now, the show in the gallery at the Culture Club, just a little plug, is with Silver Art Projects. And basically, Silver Art Projects is the art residency in Tower 4. And
what's an art residency?
It's where artists get free studio space, a stipend, and an awesome space on the 28th floor of Tower 4.
So what does that look like as an artist? I come in, I have my own canvas, own paint.
Yeah, you typically would set up your operation. So this residency, I believe it's somewhere around like 20 to 30 artists on the floor. So they all have, I would guess, maybe like 500 to 800 square feet.
Okay.
And they basically are, you know, stanchioned off with like a big wall for their paintings or for their photos or for, you know, their sculptures. And they go there and work, and they can, you know, come and go as they please and just utilize the space and the resources. So
now I know you guys are nonprofit. So how does an artist apply to get that space and to get that gig?
So that's Silver Art Projects, which they have an open call each year, and they get thousands of submissions.
And they just take the best ones,
and they have
but
they have a really good selection committee. So they have some pretty prominent people in the art world, like Swiss Beats and Hank Willis Thomas, and a few other like really like knockout people that are on that selection committee. And their director, Gregory Thornberry, and their team there with Lily, like they're awesome. Like they're very motivated, capable, you know, just very passionate, you know. And I think they look at all the submissions for sure. They take it all very seriously. I know, you know, it's like anything with these platforms. We all wish there was more of it to go around. You know what I mean? Like if you could get 50 artists in that space, wouldn't that be awesome? If you could get 100 artists and double the space, wouldn't that be awesome?
People aren't really going into the office every day, and maybe more office buildings have just like vacant spaces.
Yeah.
It seems like this is an opportunity for
well, artists. I think we've been really trying to lead the charge with, you know, just pressuring these organizations that have the space and saying, look, it benefits nobody to have them empty.
Yeah.
You know, really, and maybe you get a tax abatement or some write-off because it's a loss for you, perhaps.
Right.
But like, it's also a loss for everybody. Yes. It's a loss for the community. It's a loss for New York City at large. And so, you know, we have the fortune of having seen New York in the 90s. And to me, I think that's why I love New York so much and why I'm so excited about really like post-pandemic New York, because it really felt like in the pandemic, we had a bit of a stop where it was like, wait a second, what's going on here? You know, like we all had to reevaluate daily life. The businesses all reevaluated. A lot of people had to drop rents and let in new businesses. So that through that cataclysm, and, you know, I can't stress that enough. I don't think, you know, it's hard to find the positive in something like COVID. But at the end of the day, it also like changed New York in a way that I felt brought people closer together. Like it created opportunities that weren't there before. So ultimately, it's kind of like all my friends who stayed in New York during the pandemic, all of them came out like light years ahead of if that hadn't happened, because in a lot of ways it makes sense. It's like the culling of everything. So when everybody leaves, whoever's left are the only ones to work on stuff.
I think that goes without saying for the most part, even in the comedy community. Like we were all forced to, okay, now do some outdoor shows, do Zoom shows. This is uncomfortable. We have to make more videos. We have to realize that if you're not performing every single night, you got to kind of adapt to that. What's something that maybe within like since 2020 has really changed in the art world, if you've seen anything?
You know, one of the things that, and this is what led us to the creation of our gallery too, is that, you know, basically a lot of smaller and middle tier galleries went out of business during the pandemic. So that took a lot of the ecosystem out of the art world. So you have like the blue chip galleries that everybody knows by, you know, their single name monikers. You know, it's like Zwirner, Gagosian, Hauser and Wirth. And those businesses are recession proof, right? Like they have such deep pockets and coffers that they can just sit here and never sell another piece for 50 years.
Is that because they would potentially represent an artist in a painting that costs maybe $1 million and then they make money off that?
They don't really build careers. They find careers that are already budding, if that makes sense. Okay. So in the ecosystem of the art world, smaller galleries are typically the one who take chances on younger artists, emerging artists, people who've been overlooked. You know, smaller galleries can, you know, are the ones who often are leading those charges. Bigger galleries often kind of wait until people have those sales records where they can look at them as an investment and, you know, kind of that financial side of the business. Yeah. And so they don't really, a lot of the major galleries, with exception of, you know, some of them, a lot of them don't really build careers as much as they kind of watch someone who's already budding, get in at the right time, and then help build. Right, so they open up institutions for people. They get them great collectors. They expand them to a global network.
But the Culture Club is really building artists, correct?
That's the whole goal. So we've shown 285 artists in the almost 3 years we've been open.
Oh, so how many artists are in the gallery at a particular time?
10 to 12 is probably like average.
And it's just one piece of theirs?
Usually we have a fairly large space. So it's just about 2,000 square feet. Okay. And so it's deceptively big. You know, right now in the show, it's any show could have between 20 to 60 pieces.
Okay.
So we've had full-scale murals that we brought in and put on the walls. So it's a really, you know, compatible space for whatever the vision of any show would be. But also, you know, I think when we show artists, we want everything to be cohesive. So it's less about how many pieces an artist has in a show, and more about the show making sense. And so one of the things that we've been really fortunate to do with the Culture Club is hand the reins of kind of curatorial duties over to the curators that come in and propose to us. So people bring in their roster of artists.
So how does that look, just before you get on?
So a curator comes in and they say, hey, I've got this great proposal for a show. I would love to have a great
client, or
no, they typically will be like, I work with, let's say, XYZ artists, and I've been really trying to put together a show for them and having a hard time finding a space. To tell you, traditionally, curators who are finding a space typically would have to pay for the space outright or have an arrangement in place where they get a percentage from the sale. And so by taking out the overhead of a gallery and taking out the financial side of, you know, we don't handle transactions. The Culture Club does not sell the work. The artists sell it. The curators help manage it for the artists at times. But the Culture Club just is outside of that. Because our whole thing is the exhibition side of it. We want people to be able to get eyes on their work, to get their work out there. And it's really about the art of it, you know, because ultimately the thing I think that's finicky about the art world and art is that you're taking two things that are diametrically opposed, making money and being creative. Like there's very little overlap on those.
Funny, yeah, even in comedy it's kind of the same way.
Yeah, because it's like earnesty, it's hard to come by.
Yes.
You know, integrity, it's hard to come by. And so I think with us, like that's what we're really trying to find, are like the people and the artists and where the values are aligned, where it's creativity, sharing creativity, sponsoring creativity, because that just blossoms. You know, by helping these 285 artists, we've had 100,000 visitors. So we've had people from all over the world come in. It's the World Trade Center. And, you know, so having that amount of traffic, I have no idea the impact we've had, you know, and I have
can't really put a number on
I have anecdotes. I mean, I have moments where I was like, wow, this really means something. Like you're doing something that means something.
So if somebody were to come into the Culture Club though and purchase a piece that's on the wall, how does that go?
Typically, they'll reach out to Clayton or myself or whoever, one of our gallery assistants who's sitting in the gallery, and we will always directly connect the dots. So we'll either put together an email or say, hey, this is the contact info of the artist, or in some cases, the curator, and then they manage their sale independently.
This sounds great and phenomenal for artists. What's the incentive for you guys?
I think it's our passion for what we love.
Like, you're talking about anecdotally, you don't know how much money you made, but, you know, could be multiple billions, you know?
Well, and even outside of the money, it's like we've created opportunities where there weren't. And I think that to me is more exciting because we've been able to have digital campaigns all over the whole World Trade Center where artists were able to show their work on those screens. You know, we've had some really cool activations. And I think for us, my brother and I eat, sleep, breathe, like all of it art. You know, that's from the time I get up to the time I go to bed, art is infusing itself in my life. But I'm also like a immensely curious person. So like if I walk outside and I watch the way shadows hit different objects, or if I watch like the trees blowing, simple things fascinate me. So I think for my brother and myself, we were just kind of tired of seeing like New York emptying out, people not supporting artists. A lot of people who say they're supporting artists are just building their brand, you know, and we wanted to just basically be like, no, like this is the right way to do it. And we looked at each other and we were like, okay, this is going to be really hard to sustain. You know, we're like, how do you sustain something? Well, we have a sweetheart deal with our developer who gave us the space at a very reasonable rate. And we worked out, you know, my brother and I volunteer all of our time for the Culture Club to date. And then we officially became a nonprofit. So now we're trying to figure out how to take in donations, fundraise, and make it into something that's a scalable model beyond just New York City, potentially places like Los Angeles, London. You know, we've had conversations to that effect because the model itself is low overhead, high yield. You know, basically, if you build it, artists will come and infuse it with life, and just creating the platform makes it like that. So
yeah, and are you doing pop-ups right now? So you were at Basel, right?
Yeah, we've done quite a few activations and things like that. We had a space in Midtown that we've been curating related to the Louise Nevelson Chapel, which if you've never gotten to see that, that's a really phenomenal room.
Where is that?
It's in the Citicorp building. So back when Citicorp was trying to build their new building on 49th and Madison, they basically, or 49th and Lex, they basically had to make a deal with the church. And the church, St. Peter's, sold air rights and enabled them to build above them. But in exchange,
that's
they created...
New York City real estate shit, if you don't know about air rights, by the way. Look it up!
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, of course. And so basically they had to sell it and make it so that it was a public space for people. And they've hosted art shows there for the last 50, 60 years. In fact, some of the first shows there were put on by Elaine de Kooning, Willem de Kooning's wife.
Okay.
So it's a really special place, and there's this chapel in there. The artist Louise Nevelson, who's renowned, just phenomenal artist, great work, but she designed the entire chapel, all of it, the pews, the walls, everything. You know, it's just one of those places that like you go in there and it's transcendent. It's beautiful.
Do you have a favorite artist right now? Maybe someone who's at the
living
Culture
or
Club.
dead. You know, let's go living, right?
No.
I feel like
we can do both.
Yeah, let's do that. It's funny because someone asked my brother the other question the other day, and he just
That question?
he started rattling off.
But yeah, I feel like that's an
20 artists.
annoying question too for someone to ask
really.
you.
I
But
think
we're on a
it's-
podcast, dude.
So I think it's super insightful, you know, because
Yeah.
like one of the questions, and I'll pivot back there in a second, but I think you'll like this. So one of the things about, you know, if you're ever at a stagnant room of conversation, I always like to ask people like, you know, if you could come back as any animal, what would you come back as? And you can come back on that. You can think about it because I feel like these questions have incredible insight.
But yeah, because like you'll maybe know more about me
some
depending
people
on
wanna
what
be a
animal I
butterfly.
say. Yeah.
And some people
I can
want
fucks
to
with
be a
that.
lion.
Oh hell yeah! I want to be a freaking butterfly lion, dude.
Yeah. A lion with butterflies.
Floating it.
Like,
with the eagle
this
noise.
lion has really small wings.
Yeah, literally.
It might be kind of frustrating. You know?
Yeah. Just be a predator, but being so soft.
Now, would you be the lion size with wings small, or big wings and small lion?
I think. I gotta think about
Griffin.
that.
So you want to be a griffin?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Harry Potter.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I feel like that's the same thing with artists, right? Like if you ask my brother, he talks about like David, he talks about Michelangelo, Raphael. You know what's funny? He might not have even said David. I love David. He loves David, but like he's very much like opinionated on what is critical in art. And for him, people like Rembrandt, Vermeer, these people painted feelings. You know, they were able to paint whatever they wanted, but it's accompanied by an emotion. And a lot of people who don't really participate in art the way that we do, I would say kind of can see something that's done photorealistically and be like, oh, that's incredible. And it is. But it's not the same thing as a piece that like transcends your emotions and brings you to tears or makes you feel feelings that are just extraordinarily powerful. And my brother, I would say, has those experiences regularly. He gets goosebumps, he gets, you know, chills around art. It's rare for me to have that moment. And when I have it, I'm like, oh my God, this is something.
And to talk about artists that would be dead and alive, do you
Yeah,
get
so-
like that around those?
I'll say
type of
this,
artists?
like, yeah, it really depends. Like I've been in so Keith Haring is one of my heroes. As a New Yorker, like I remember seeing his work in the city. You know what I mean? Like out and about. And like, I just feel like that's such a cool little like moment in life to like, going back to graffiti and going back to that, it's like, he was an artist of the people. You know, I met one of his old barbers recently, and he said he traded a leather jacket to the barber for a few haircuts. You know, he's like that kind of dude where like he knew the power of his work, he knew the power of what he was doing, and one of his best pieces is actually at St. John the Divine on 110th or 111th Street, and it's this beautiful altarpiece, and it was one of the last pieces he ever made. And the other thing about Keith Haring that's like a fun fact and super cool is his studio is still right on Great Jones and Broadway.
Okay.
So if you walk by, just like in the middle of the block, there's like a fitness place next door. You look in the lobby, and the whole lobby is painted with his murals, and the foundation is still there.
Hey.
I've never been, but I'll get there.
Yeah, you gotta go.
And then the other artist that I think about a lot is Roy Lichtenstein.
Yeah, some of his I guess
cool.
like I don't know what's the replica, right? Yeah. I like his stuff.
Oh, they're
I
great.
like his stuff.
They're
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So I had the fortune of visiting his studio a number of years ago.
Where's that?
It was in I think it's like Perry Street and like Greenwich Ave or something like that. It's in the West Village, and they just recently, I believe, gave it to the Whitney Museum. And so his studio was like this gorgeous townhouse with like a bookshelf that you would open up like Batman to go into the studio. And his studio was left the way he left it, which was extraordinary just to see like his meticulousness, like his process, but also just like this amazing, it's right across from Westbeth. Do you know the artist housing down there?
No.
Okay, yeah, Westbeth, it's like they've helped create housing for artists for decades. And so he was like right across the street basically.
What do you think about Banksy?
Respect.
The New York
Got
legend,
a funny
right?
Banksy story.
Give us a peek, Ed.
So, the question is, who's Banksy?
Who the hell is Banksy?
People have thoughts. I personally am like, I like
thoughts?
the work. Well, I don't know who it is. There's like a lot of theories out there, but the thing that was really funny is I could have found out and totally missed it because of how chaotic my schedule is. So my brother and I were going to the triennial at the new school. Or the new museum, sorry. And the new museum is just on over in the Bowery area.
Is that an exhibit, the triennial?
Yeah, every 3 years they have it. That's one of those octogenarian triennial
All right.
sommelier moments.
Yes, nice.
So in any event, we were going there and we were in a rush. So we were late, perpetually late. I apologize to my grandfather.
You were early today?
I texted you because I was like, hey, I'm going to be 10 minutes late.
I appreciate the time updates, man. Sometimes with comics, we're not all, or some other comics are not so great on time. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no. I mean, professionally, I'm always on time. But, in the sense of like life, and especially in New York, I feel like I squeeze that extra thing in each day, and that extra thing in costs me to be 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes here, but I'm always considerate. I think that's the key.
Definitely.
Like, as long as you text people, as long as you keep them posted and don't just like show up late and diva it out, it's like, no, everyone's time is valuable and we all are like in New York for a reason. So like, I try to be respectful of that. But so we were running late back to the triennial, and I see the mural on Bowery and Houston being painted. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I stopped to take a photo. My brother goes, we don't have time to take a photo. Come on, we got to go. And it ended up the next day, it was Banksy. And he was doing his like huge tour of New York.
But nobody knew who it was. It was just some guy painting.
At the time, nobody knew what was going on. It was all these hash marks. And I remember being like, oh, that's pretty cool, And he did like a New York City takeover where he had like a truck that like came around with a bunch of pigs in the side of it, like, maquettes. And like, I think he's awesome. Like, I think like his work is cool. I think the ethos behind it is cool.
What's the story behind him though?
As far as I can tell,
why do we all care?
I think a lot of it is the messaging. It's like the iconic image of the protester with the flowers. It's kind of like that. It's like that 70s photo of like the flower going into the tip of the gun. It's like, it's like Kendall Jenner and Pepsi.
Yeah. Save the world, Kenny.
But basically, it's I feel like the imagery and iconography that he's created internationally is up there with the best. And I feel like there's a lot of humor in his work. There's seriousness in the work. There's activism in it. And also, I think what I love about him and what I love about artists like Ai Weiwei, who, full disclosure, I met on Monday, was like so cool to meet him. I've actually had a week of meeting two of my art heroes.
Oh, dope.
I met Frank Stella last night.
And are you going to be working with them, like Culture Club wise?
Well, so my brother actually helped put together an exhibition with Silverstein Properties in Tower 7 of the World Trade Center. And it's all about the history of art at the World Trade Center. And so that actually just opened last night. It was the culmination of 6 months of hard work from dozens of people. Dope. Thank you. And it was very well attended. It was such a sweet exclamation point. And in that process, one of the things we had to do was tell the story of the art that's been at the World Trade Center. And so when the Twin Towers, back in, let's say like the 90s, they had quite a lot of artists who were in residence already there. So there's a history of it down there, which I find awesome. And so basically, in that space and in that kind of show that we put on, it was all about telling the story and weaving the narrative of like, these were the artists who had works in these lobbies before, and these are works that were destroyed, and these are works that were in the collection, and then these are works of artists who are here now as part of the rebuilding and part of the resurgence and the renewal down there. And so, for us, I think that moment. So in a way, I got to show Frank Stella. One of the cool things we got to do is make a reproduction of his two pieces that were lost in the attacks. And so we blew him up huge, and he, just to see the look on his face when we were sharing it with him, it was it's like you saw an old friend.
That's so cool.
So like in a way, yeah, like I had a really sweet moment being like, this is, come back to life in a way.
What makes an artist pop? Like people talk about the struggling artists, they go through years, and then I forget the painter or artist who died and then who was it? There are probably a lot.
But there's a lot. But there's also there's nothing better for an artist's career than dying. That's number one.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Fixed commodity.
Yeah. But like, what is it? Is it one painting that makes them pop that everyone's like, oh, this is the one after 20 years of their work, this is it?
I think that most importantly, it's stylistically being recognizable. I think people like to see things that they can recognize.
Yeah,
so with like
Picasso,
Picasso,
yeah.
Matisse, these guys, you just see their work and immediately you know. You know what I mean? Like there's no question about it. Anna Wyant, her work is like that. You see her work. She's a rock star in the art world. Just super
she's
cool.
young, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've heard
she's
of
awesome.
Her. Okay.
I've photographed her before. I'm working on a project now, photographing a lot of my peers, because I feel like I have this really fortunate access to artists, and I feel like I've been let in. And I'm like, ooh, like what are you like? You gotta document this. And so it kind of started during the pandemic, and then it's just completely evolved where it's like a consistent thing where I get to take photos of my friends and photos of artists. And so I'm compiling a book basically about artists in New York in this time period. And so the whole idea is that artists, like anybody, are like couldn't be more of a variety, you know?
Yeah, to just go back to what makes an artist pop. An artist who has stylistic behavior that they repeat over and over and people start to recognize, is that kind of what makes a painting that's super valuable that just looks like, oh, I could do that?
That's a good question. Ultimately, it's like beauty's in the eye of the beholder, so is value.
Okay.
And it's all about perception. And I think like when I see that you could get a masterpiece from the 1600s or 1700s for half the price of a contemporary piece, I'm always a little baffled myself. Because to me, just like the idea of like a relic of time is already so valuable. You know what I mean? So I think it's an enigma for everybody, what makes work sell for the prices they do.
Yeah.
But what it really comes down to is it's kind of, you get a room full of 10 collectors together. They like somebody's work. They've just set the market. So whatever they say it's worth, it's worth.
And setting the market, it just seems like art pieces just continuously keep going up and up and up. Is that just the nature of art? Like if somebody paid $500,000 for it, they're expecting to get at least $1 million for it. Like, how does that work?
People collect for different reasons.
Yeah.
My brother and I both kind of like to joke that we have collections we could never afford because everything we've bought has like totally, like we're very fortunate, but we also have no intention of ever selling a single piece from our collection.
Ah, interesting. And
because like we buy it because we love it.
And where is your collection? Like at
it's
your
at
apartment?
Our house. Yeah. So we have it all,
tight.
like our walls are covered. It has a lot of my work, my photos, my brother's paintings.
And you just are insured through it?
Lots of others. Yeah. Lots of others works on the walls. So
nice, dude.
And some of the better pieces are in storage, unfortunately, because we just don't have the space,
Is there like a special art storage place or you just put it in one of those
we have like flat
a
files. No, we have like flat files that you can lay flat. It's like stuff that's not framed.
Okay.
And so those are like a little treasure trove of like, cool prints that, one of the fortunes I think of working with artists is artists are quite generous people. Typically I would say that there's a lot about artists that is geared towards giving. Because in a lot of ways, like you're giving yourself into your work, you're exposing yourself in your work. You're putting, I know you're a comedian.
Nice, dude. You laid that one up for us.
Yeah.
Speaking of exposing yourself, enjoy this picture of me. Imagine.
This is all scripted.
Yes.
No? I have a good memory, but but back to what makes an artist pop and those things. I think it's the shell that everyone's trying to crack. And what I would say the biggest things I've noticed, if I were to like reverse engineer what makes artists successful, because that's what I've been trying to do my whole life. If I had to say like one thing I've been thinking about is like, how do I continue to crack that shell? How do I get closer into the rooms I want to be in? How do I get my work in the institutions I want them to be in? How do I get them in the hands of the people who appreciate it and don't view it as just like a financial instrument? Because I think that's one of the gnarly sides of the art world is that unfortunately popping doesn't last forever.
Yeah. Do you think we have any artists right now who are continuously peaking as each of their works goes towards the public? There's
a few kind of things I would say on that. One is, of course, right? But I would never name names because one of my, it's not McCarthyism, but like one of my things is like, if you decide to be an artist, I already think that that's the hardest decision in life, period. I don't need to be involved in like speculation on that. You know what I mean? Like I respect the hell out of anybody who's decided to be a creative, a comedian, an artist. I actually think comedy is the hardest gig of all the creatives. Like, I've thought about this because, you know, it's like we can go down that rabbit hole, but like in terms of like art, you know, ultimately you have limited time to make a mark, and that mark is not guaranteed to last. So the whole thing is consistency. A lot of people have great energy that keeps it going. And I think, you know, I saw something recently. I forget which actor said it. It was one of the guys from The Office, which I did not really watch. I'm sorry, but everyone's like, you didn't watch that? Rainn Wilson, that's who it was. Okay. And he said he had this acting coach who like grabbed him by the arm and was like, don't ever give up. Like, don't stop. If you stop, that's when they win. That's what everybody's telling you. No, you can't succeed. You can't win. So I think it's that idea that no matter what, you're going to keep on trudging forward because it's a commitment. And it's not something you decide like when you're 18, like I'm going to be an artist, or when you're 23, like maybe I'll be an artist. It's like you're born an artist.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You know, and it's like it's waiting to come out of you. You know, it's like you can't hold it in. You could, I think, you know, one of the pieces of advice, a few of my good friends, one of my good friends, Adam, works in film at HBO, and he was just saying he had a great mentor. And his mentor always, you know, basically would tell him, you know, if you could imagine yourself doing anything else at all, go do that. Right? And I think that's great advice because like I couldn't imagine myself sitting at a desk 5 days a week. I couldn't imagine it. And I respect people who do, and I respect all the reasons people have to hustle and grind and do what they have to do. But I've had to hustle and grind, and I've done all sorts of paying the dues, and I'm still paying dues. You know, I'm about to be 35, and I feel like I'm just getting started. You know, like I'm excited for the next 35, maybe the next 70, who knows?
Do you see yourself and your brother opening more culture clubs, giving more opportunities to artists?
Oh, absolutely.
Or is that kind of the
absolutely? But also we want it to be kind of an itinerant idea as well, where we could host exhibitions in places that provide a space for, you know, a moment in time, and that we could potentially have collaborations with different brands and bring them in to just like shine light on artists. Because I think, you know, the thing is the artists who are showing in these blue chip galleries, they're already fine, you know. And there is a certain burden, let me say this, with being a successful artist like that level of like, you know, selling works for $500,000 or $1 million.
What's a name like that who's alive right now? Who would have the burden?
I would say, you know, for me, good question. Because it might be easier for me to say artists who are like no longer alive, because I feel like I wouldn't want to assume the burden for people. Sure. But I think one of the things that I have always worried about is that like with an artist, if you hit something, like if you make something amazing, then there's almost like the expectation that like that's what you do, right? So like if you make let's say Warhol only was known from like his like silkscreen portraits, right? Then if that's all you do, then it becomes like any other job, like a cobbler for a shoe. It becomes rote, right? And I think that as an artist, the challenge is to always like stoke your creativity. So again, you're fighting between like having to make money, make a living, have a career, you know, appease a lot of people, but then like speaking to what you want to speak to, have to speak to, what is important that you get off your chest. You know, so there's this really delicate balance of like, do you want to just become somebody who makes the same thing over and over again?
Yeah.
Or do you want to be somebody who like takes chances and like, you know, some of it falls flat on its face, but like, who cares?
You know who I can think of, I guess just like musical artist wise, like Drake for the most part. Like, I don't know if it's that related to art itself, sure. But I think just like you've seen him evolve over each album that he puts out, and people hate it for the first 2 weeks, and then they learn to love it. They're like, oh, this is this type, this is that.
So I love that you said that, because like, I like Drake for what it's worth. Like, I think his music, like, I like a lot of the early stuff. Like, I remember he had a song on, what is the first album that was originally like released on, it's like datpiff.com. Do you know that website?
I vaguely remember that.
Okay, they would release like mixtapes, and it was Best I Ever Had.
Sure.
And then like one of the songs like November 18th, that's my birthday. And I was like, oh, this guy's cool. And
I'm the 13th. Let's go, Scorpio Bros.
And so basically, he was on the cover of Double XL magazine with a friend of ours from high school. They were launching at the same time. Charles Hamilton, who's one of the most...
Charles Hamilton, of course, from Brooklyn. Ain't nothing like a Brooklyn.
So he went to
I saw him at SLB's.
Oh, cool. He's awesome.
Back in the day. Okay.
That guy's a genius. Like, beyond. He's one of those minds where I remember seeing him and being like, I wish I could treat music the way he does. You know, I love music, love music, but I don't really make it. I don't play, you know, big Fred again fan. You know, I just like really respect people who are like kings of their craft. But also people like him who are just like born for it. Like they're naturals. Like his mind just worked differently than everyone else's. And so, you know, Charles Hamilton was on the same cover. It was like Asher Roth, you know, names that nobody talks about anymore, right?
I love college.
Who didn't? But anyway.
Maybe not you, bro. You were there for a minute.
I visited.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. You did visit.
Yeah, I did a short stint. But basically, you know, Drake, and going back to that, I was wondering, you know, he's part of the machine, right? And once you're in the machine, it's like Bieber, right? Like Bieber I don't keep up with Bieber. I don't listen to Bieber. I know that at some point he started off as like a talented young kid and Usher picked him up and the rest was history. But like you start to notice that a lot of people, there's like a certain complacency that comes with success because it's like, I did all this. It's like Snoop Dogg, right? Like I love Snoop, but like he hasn't put out a song since like Drop It Like It's Hot, right? Like that's kind of like the last like song that was like a big Snoop song. And in the 90s, you couldn't have had a bigger artist.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Tennessee Williams. I think he's just one of the great playwrights of our time.
The Glass Menagerie.
Great play. Yeah. Streetcar Named Desire.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah.
Stella!
Yeah.
Fresh Marlon Brando.
And so basically, you should look it up after this, and everyone should too, but there's a great piece of prose he wrote called The Tragedy of Success. And it was basically how depressed he was after all of his rock star success. And I have a few friends who
even as a playwright?
Well, let me say this. I have a few friends who are in film, and one of them who's quite well known in film, will remain nameless, but told me, you'll never meet more depressed people than celebrities. And that stuck with me. You know, and when I was younger, I had a job, you know, where I was playing sports with kids. Right after I graduated college, my mom was like, you need a job? And I was like, I've only tutored and worked at Lacoste. And she was like, well, just get a job. And so I put an ad in the paper, and this family with kids that their dad was old, and they had 3-year-old sons, and I played sports with them. Sweet family, lovely kids. And basically they would take me with them to all the nice places. And I remember being in all the nice places and seeing how miserable everyone was and thinking, yeah, this isn't it. You know, and that was at a time when I was a little more like glitz and glamour and like had to keep up with the appearances at GW, and like kids were driving to school in like, you know, Lamborghinis and Ferraris and like getting tables at like 17, 18 years old. Yeah. And I remember thinking I could like keep up, you know, like I was working my ass off. And I just couldn't, I was like, and then it hit me after like I had that work experience and going to all the shishi clubs in Palm Beach and the Hamptons and all around. And once you've seen it, you're like, oh, it's like, I'd rather talk to the dude like picking up the dishes or like the guy who's like hanging at the door working security, because half the people in those rooms are just looking for what they can, you know, who they can work, you know, what they can get out of somebody. And so I had this like really unique experience where it kind of like shifted my perspective of like, what matters, you know, and like where to put your attention. And so like, I'm not driven by success. I'm not driven by money. I'm not driven by like, it just probably circles back to the whole, like, what do you expect to get out of the culture club?
Yeah.
I'm driven by impact. I'm driven by, you know, actually doing something where I want to leave a lasting mark on art, culture, the world. Like I have very, very lofty aspirations. And I like that because it's kind of that idea, like there's a great Bob Marley quote where someone asked him if he was rich. And he said, why am I rich? Because I have a lot of money? He said, no, I'm rich because I have my family, I have my health, I have my, you know, I have love. And I always, you know, I love that idea. He said, numbers, they only get bigger. So if you're driven by numbers, you're just going to keep chasing the bigger number. So that was like a real, you know, I had a degree in economics at 19. I also graduated in 2008, the height of the financial collapse. May 2008, I was like, my backup plan became not a backup plan. You know what I mean? It was like when Lehman, it was like all that crazy time. Uh-huh. And so I really kind of had to like dig deep and decide, you know, ultimately, and it's like, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to work in the creative space. I'm so lucky to feed that. And I love sharing little tidbits, and so I'll quote Maya Angelou as well. But she talked about how creativity is like a fountain. And it's not a fountain that runs out. It's actually a fountain that the more you use it, the more it flows. And she's one of my heroes. You know, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is just a phenomenal story of humanity, you know, of beauty despite trauma and tragedy. You know, so I always thought to myself, I said, you know, I don't know if you're familiar, if you've read it or if you kind of know the gist of it, but
no, I don't.
She suffered a really deep trauma at 4 or 5 years old at the behest of her stepfather. And she told her mother what had happened. And the next day, the guy was killed by her uncles. Okay? And she didn't speak for the next year or two at all because she thought that her voice had caused it.
Oh, my.
And so that's why it's called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. You know? And so her life became this mission of just fighting the good fight, you know, just like creativity at the forefront, you know. And there was this amazing exhibition at the New York Public Library, which back to like museums and sleepers.
Bryant Park.
Yeah, Bryant Park, which that building is extraordinary. If you ever get to go, they have like apparently like 7 floors of stacks underneath.
Oh, wow.
It's an extraordinary building. And they had this awesome exhibition of just like oddities and like things that were like, they had like Malcolm X's briefcase. They had like a original Albrecht Dürer, like huge wall, like lithograph. Like they had all these like really cool stuff. And then one of them was her original manuscript for I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And it was just like a yellow notepad, you know? And I think that, you know, so many, this is great advice for creatives, but like we all put impediments in our own way. And I think that like one of the things that for me, I always think about is like we're electrical beings. So like our body's firing you know, there's electrons moving throughout us, and electricity always takes the path of least resistance. So we're by nature lazy. No, if you had to go fix, you know, if you have to go over there, but you don't really have to go over there, you're not going to do it. So I kind of try to short circuit my mind a lot, where it's like I have the thought, oh, don't do it. You save it for later.
Get onto it.
And then I just like slap myself basically, like get up and go. So I think that way about a lot of things, that like, you know, life is full of challenges. It's full of unpleasantries. It's full of things that like you don't want to deal with. But by handling them with like grace and dignity and like having that attitude of like, there's a great quote, if it's good, good. If it's bad, good. You know, it's like that idea that like, it's very Buddhist. It's like, hey,
everything
like,
is good. It's for you.
Sarah, Sarah, right? Like every moment is part of the whole. Yeah, I think that those perspectives, like I really admire a number of people, as you can tell, like I pay attention to, you know, people who've done what I want to do. And in a lot of ways, I pay attention to people who've done what I don't want to do too. Because, you know, I read biographies on Rockefeller and Vanderbilt to be like, how did these guys become who they were? And then I saw, and I didn't finish either book. I got to the point where I got the information and I was like, okay, that makes sense. You know what I mean? And I could share those anecdotes at a later date, but like fascinating, you know, fascinating, because I think our culture, and it comes back to this like kind of full circle conversation of like, our culture is hyper-focused on celebrity, hyper-focused on materialism, hyper-focused on money, right? And at the end of the day, it's like money's a tool, right? It's not the end. It's not the goal. It's like, you know what I mean? So it's like anything where, you know, I liken it to like fire, right? Like fire can burn houses or it can make a meal, right? Water, you can drown or you can swim. We live in this world where we're on screens all the time. I wake up and look at my screen. I go to bed and look at my screen. And I'm addicted to my phone. Who isn't? It's the primary resource you use every day. It is such a phenomenal tool, but you have to be in charge of it, right? And so I think one of the things that I really am like very fortunate, I feel like at this age, to have a grasp on is materialism. I wear this basically as my like uniform.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. We didn't plan this out either.
Yeah, dude, with all black. That's like New York. Yeah. Very New York of us, dude. All black and the white socks. Hopefully I'm wearing two different same socks. Okay, same socks. I'm good today.
It's funny that IES was cut off. I was like, his socks
is he wearing different socks?
No,
it says Eeks.
I was like, dude.
Yeah, dicks. Yeah. Hilarious, dude.
Yeah. But yeah, so basically I feel like by not wanting, by not like desiring, you know, I don't need to have a big house or fancy car, or I don't need to have people come up to me and compliment my outfit. None of that does anything for me. You know, you're a laugh because I've really touched on the spectrum of like influences in my life and people. And one of them is actually a Catholic saint. I grew up Roman Catholic. And my mom, you know, I had a really tough period of my life with asthma. Like I have really hard, like I had like 7 years of daily asthma attacks.
Damn.
Yeah, it was like, it was brutal. And my mom, like, I was always kind of digging deep and trying to figure out, like, why me, you know? And again, this was from 25 to 32. So, like, prime years of your life to be having an inhaler on you at all times. And it was tough, you know? I think it molded me in a way that is probably why I have a lot of the perspectives I have. Like, would I want to do it again? I don't think I could. You know what I mean? I got very lucky where my asthma more or less like went into remission, so to speak, where it's under control. And it took a lot to get there. But in that journey, my mom was really like prominent and, you know, just sharing like all these philosophers and thinkers. And so back to the Catholic saint, there were two. There was Saint Teresa's, and they're both Saint Teresa's. And they both just had, I read both of their biographies. You know, I love biographies. And, you know, they both kind of have these outlooks on life and outlooks on like how to go about living a fulfilled life, how to like feed your soul. That resonated with me regardless of denomination.
What's like an example of that?
So a good one is Saint Teresa of Lisieux of the Little Flower. She was a French saint who died in her young 20s and suffered immensely. And, you know, she actually, I couldn't wrap my head around this one, but she prayed for suffering because she wanted to take it on. And I was like, you lost me there, sister. But before that, one of the things I loved was that she talked about all of people like flowers in God's garden. And she said, you know, everybody wants to be the rose, but the wildflower should just be happy being with the wildflower. And the lavender might be the best smelling, and it needs to be happy being the lavender. And the lily has, you know, so she started basically likening us to just basically understanding who you are as like the first step of like living that life, right? Where everybody wants to be the rose nowadays, right? Everybody wants to be the Instagram star of like, you know? And to be honest with you, I've watched it with Ai Weiwei. I watched it with Frank Stella. I watched it with, there's another young artist who had a show, Devon Rodriguez, who's like a rock star at UTA, the most followed artist on social media channels. He's got like 100 million plus followers. Mm-hmm. He started by doing portraits of people on the subway and giving them their portraits and TikToking it. The power of TikTok. Now, I watched all of these people at openings and at all of the things that I recently, and they basically get paraded, right? And it's part of the job. I get paraded. You know, there are times when I go to rooms and I just kiss babies and shake hands, you know, like a politician, and I don't have that in me. I'm not a politician. I want every interaction to be earnest. Like, I want to have like the real conversations. I don't want to say the, hey, how you doing? Take a selfie. But it's part of the job. Like, who cares? I have plenty of great selfies with cool people. And I'm very lucky where I've met like these people who are like titans of industry, and they were like the coolest people. It was the ones who were like middle tier who were like, I'm not taking a photo with you. The ones like Oprah, you know, they were like, yeah, I'll take a photo. And I think that's so cool because it's like, it showed me that it's not about, you know, that hierarchy or structure of like, you can't be around me, you touch this, so to speak. It's so unhealthy if you live and die by likes and if you live and die by clicks, because then it becomes so disingenuous. And that's one of my biggest fears in life, that for any reason whatsoever, I lose the passion I have. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I made it this far.
Yeah, dude.
Like, I don't think it's going to happen, but like, it's, you know, one of the things, and this is back to the other Saint Teresa. You like how I can tie things together.
Yeah, dude, I'm loving it.
I don't fully trail off. But the other Saint Teresa of Avila, who's a fascinating figure. She was like one of the foremost like theologians of like the Catholic Church, like the first like actually respected woman in the church.
Is theologian, it's a plural of theologist? Maybe?
It's a theolufemism.
Damn, dude, you're killing us with the words. We love it. We love
it. And, you know, just thinking about her, they said she had levitated in front of groups of like dozens of people. Yeah, I'm like, this is fascinating.
That's dope,
like,
yeah.
I'm open-minded.
Teach us,
you know,
right.
I've had some pretty spiritual experiences and pretty paranormal experiences and like things where I'm like, okay, there's something else at play here. You know, I don't know what's all going on.
Yeah.
I don't know how it all works, but like energy is real. You know, going off of vibes, if you feel a bad vibe, it's like, you feel it. You know what I mean? We're animals. At the end of the day, when the hair stands up on the back of your neck or you get goosebumps, you didn't decide to do either of those, right? So like a big part of what we have is like this like sixth sense. And, you know, it is kind of funny because now that I like brought her up and like went off on that little tangent, I'm like, why did I like bring her up again? I'll get back to that. It'll come to me because now I totally did trail off. Yeah, let's come back to that.
When you look at a piece of art, or maybe you were talking about your brother briefly about like getting goosebumps looking at art. Is that something like, is that the artist coming out through the painting? What is the colors? It's the vibe.
By the way, it just came to me. I'm sorry. So it's basically the idea. She talks about searching your soul, and she compares the soul to a castle. And she says, as you go through the castle, it has 7 layers. That's at least what she said. And on the outer layers where most people live, they never really soul search. They don't question who they are. They don't question what their purpose is. They don't question why they are angry all the time. They don't question why they're sad whatever it may be. And that's not, I think there are choices we all make that can make our lives easier. And I think there are things that we're born with that people struggle with. And I totally respect and acknowledge all of that. But I think that there's a lot of things that we can do to combat and to give ourselves the best chance at a healthy, mindful life. And so she always said, once you continue to go through those layers of the soul, when you're on the outside, the lizards will come and nibble at your feet and the mosquitoes will bite you. And she's like, you get another layer in and the lizards aren't there. And then by the time you get all the way in, that's when she says you're at like closeness with God.
Yeah.
And she says, once you get to that point, whatever anyone says to you, good, bad, indifferent, is the same, right? It doesn't matter. You could say, look at me and be like, hey, buddy. Or you could be like, wow, that's incredible. It means the same thing to me if you really like boil it down, because it's your opinion, right? And
which doesn't matter, theoretically. Someone else's opinion.
Like we make it matter, right? We care so much. And do you watch How To with John Wilson?
Yeah, I have. I watched the like the beginning of the first episode of season 2, but season 1 was phenomenal. I loved it.
Oh, so good.
Great.
I love that guy.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, like he will put a 5-second clip on a screen and then he'll describe it in a way that is related to that scene, but it's not exactly what's going on. Like a guy will be a street vendor in Central Park will be giving a hot dog to someone and he'll be talking over it and he'll be like, it is always a good thing when you're giving out free food to people, but it's not free food. It's something like that to kind of describe it very vaguely.
Yeah. He's like a New York documentarian with great humor.
Exactly. Yes.
He's just like, he's observant and he's got a great way of tying it all together. And one thing recently that really hit me as like a really good point of inflection was, and I won't give away the last episode at all, but it's just about cryopreservation. And people who pay to have their bodies frozen.
Like Walt Disney.
Ted Williams, right? Yeah. And so I think that's the dumbest thing in the world. First of all, I wouldn't even want to come back after I've been frozen in a vat of water or, formaldehyde for decades, centuries, etc.
That's true.
But then I gave myself the mental prompt of, all right, let's assume that it's even possible. Big leap, okay? But let's assume it's possible. And you come back and you're in a room full of like people who look like you or don't look like you, whatever. And they're all looking at you, judging you. Would you care? Like, would you care what people in the future who you never met and you were popped into a room with them were like, oh, can you believe this is like how...
Well, if you're Ted Williams or Walt Disney, maybe you might care.
Well, because their egos couldn't be bigger, right? But I think that's the biggest thing to combat. Like, artists have egos. A healthy ego is like, there's no way around having an ego as a creative. Like, every creative has an ego. So I'm not saying that like, that you can ever truly overcome that. I mean, Buddhism thinks you can, but I think like ego can serve you, but it can also hinder you. And I think one of the things is like a lot of people who've accomplished or achieved, they kind of feel like their opinion is more valuable than others. When at the end of the day, it's like if you walk into a museum and you want to know about the art, you could ask the person walking around giving the tour, or you could ask the security guard. Because they're there every day listening to every tour.
Shit.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So like, it's one of those things where like some of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life are taxi drivers.
Yeah, they know everything.
Yeah, and
they
like sometimes I start talking to them and
city.
it's like, I can tell they're not vibing. I'm like, all right, cool, I tried, buddy.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, yeah, you're just trying to get through the day. Like some of those dudes, I mean, they also inspire me, to be honest with you. I talk to so many of them, and the number of those guys who work 6-7 days a week, 12, 15 hours,
a lot of them,
it kind of kicks me in the butt every time I think about it, because I'm like, oh, like anything that you're frustrated about, any of your problems, any of the things that are like weighing you down, pale in comparison to having to suffer, 40 years of sedentary lifestyle so your kids can have a better life. I respect that so much, you know? And I think that like, that's one of the things I admire. Like I admire hard work. I admire like passion, perseverance, but I also admire sacrifice. You know, people who are able to look outside of themselves and say, hey, I'm doing this so my kid has a chance.
And we see that a lot in New York, you know, looking at small business owners who are at the deli 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
You can really see it, you know, if you just take a second
it's
to
the hardest working city on the planet. There's no doubt about it. You know, one of the things I laugh about, you ask people, oh, how you doing? They go, oh, I'm so busy. It's like, oh yeah, I breathe too. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
if you're here and you're not busy,
something's
why
wrong.
are you here?
For real. Parker, this has really been a great episode, man. I appreciate you coming on the pod, dude, talking about Culture Club, talking about art and life in general. Before we get out of here, we're popping up your Instagram.
Cool. Come visit the gallery anytime, guys. We're down in the Oculus, but you can enter any of the entrances to the Oculus underneath Tower 3 and Tower 4.
Love it. Parker, thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Awesome.
Guys, thanks so much for tuning in and listening. Check the link in this YouTube video. Get to a Ted Jones comedy show, and maybe, you know, you'll see Parker and I working together in some capacity, all right?
Cool.
That'd be super fun.
Love that.
Guys, thanks again. We'll see you soon. Awesome. Peace.